Great lawyers don't always know how to build great law firms. Let's change that. Join Ben Gideon as he shares hard-won lessons from building his own financially successful law firm and practical insights from top law firm entrepreneurs, business consultants, and more. This is a podcast for lawyers, by lawyers. Welcome to Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm. Produced and powered by Law Pods.
Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm is sponsored by Supio. Supio is a cutting-edge AI program designed specifically for plaintiff trial lawyers. I have to say, I did their demo just the other day. It is a fantastic product. It does so many things well, but one of the things I was just blown away with is the way it creates medical bill summaries that have been the bane of the existence of paralegals and plaintiffs' firms for decades. It does it in seconds. It's able to identify every bill from every provider, organize it, and then identify records where there's a bill but no record, and it can keep that going throughout the life of the case. It can do a million other things, which we'll talk about as we go forward, but you should get on Supio. They just got their Series B funding. They've got 60 plus employees. It's a great business, and get on and do the demo and see what they can do for you if you're in a plaintiff's practice. We're also brought to you by Vision Spark. Vision Spark is the search firm that specializes in finding your law firm, someone like Jeff Wright. We used Vision Spark to find our COO, and I've got to tell you, it was an incredibly good process. So I can talk from the side of the business owner who's searching for a COO. What was the process like from your side, Jeff, as the person being recruited?
It was thorough. It was. I felt at times I was being interrogated, and it was a long process, but it was probably the most thorough process I've been through in my career. And their follow-up, even since I've been hired, we've had monthly calls, and they just want to follow up. And I think the way they put it was, we want to make sure we didn't sell you a bill of goods, Jeff. We want to make sure everything we told you was correct, that it was a good fit. What made it a good fit? What did we do right? What did we do wrong? And I think you couldn't ask for more in a search firm.
Yeah, and I think, we obviously made the right choice in hiring you, but they found just an amazing pool of really top-notch candidates, which, you were the best of, Jeff, which speaks to you. But they found people we never could have located on our own, people from different states, people with extraordinarily interesting backgrounds. The expense was actually worth its weight in gold. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking for an implementer or a COO, I think they can also do some other positions, but I would reach out and talk to the folks at Vision Spark. And finally, the podcast today is brought to you by 1% for Planet. Our firm, when we started, committed ourselves to joining 1% for Planet. 1% for Planet is an organization where members like ours commit to giving 1%, in our case, of all of our fee revenues to environmental nonprofit organizations. It's been a wonderful fit for us. We've probably contributed to 24 really great organizations that help preserve the environment, particularly in the northern New England states where we practice. It allows us opportunities to attend events like the one you just went to, Jeff.
Yeah, it's an organization down in southern Maine that is a refuge for injured wild animals, and they try and rehab them, and the ones that are unable to be rehabilitated to a point that they can go back to their natural environment, they house them there, and they use them as to teach classes and teach children. They've rescued somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 injured wild animals in the last 5 to 7 years. It's an extraordinary organization.
Yeah, and it's just so great to be able to support all these organizations. And when you are a member of 1% for Planet, one of the cool things is you're authorized to use the 1% logo, and we do. It's on our it's part of our branding as a firm. It's on all of our digital marketing. It tends to be on our it's on our letterhead. I mean, when we submit a brief to the court, it's got the 1% for Planet logo on it. And I just think it's a nice thing to have your business associated with something positive like that, to send a message to the world that you are giving back. And we would encourage all law firms that have the means and interest to contact 1% for Planet and become members. And if you do that, please reach out to us and we will give you a plug on the show as a new 1% for Planet member.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm. I'm Jeff Wright, Chief Operating Officer at Gideon Asen. As always, joined by today the shop dress Ben Gideon, partner, founder, owner of Gideon Asen. And we are pleased today, thrilled to be joined by Melissa Shanahan, founder of Velocity Work and strategist extraordinaire. Good morning, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
It's
fun to be on with the two of you.
We're very excited. And in full disclosure, we do work with Melissa at this firm, so we are very familiar with her and couldn't be more excited to have her on today.
I am pumped to be here. And yeah, there's no better way to start the day. It's early over here in Mountain Time.
Oh, that's right. You're out in Colorado.
Yeah.
We're not just fans, we're customers.
You are. And might I say, you're some of the best. I mean that. And maybe we'll get into some reasons why today.
I think we should get into reasons why we're the best. That would be an important topic of this podcast today. Melissa, do you want to just do a brief introduction of your company and how we came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with law firms to facilitate growth. We usually work with firms anywhere from 2 to 4 years, and it's really just to help them get through a season or really push at growth that they have their eyes set on. We have a framework that everybody goes through, which is, in short, and I can say more about this, it's aim, plan, honor. And this comes from my background. I worked at a consulting firm that did this work with private practices across the world, mostly US and Canada. And what I observed was that firms were the ones that flew the furthest, the fastest, were the ones that they knew exactly what they were aiming for. They did the work to have a well thought out plan to get there. And then they did the work to actually honor the plan. And it's almost like a three-legged stool. So when you don't have one of those, you don't really get the traction that you're looking for, which can be very frustrating, especially if you're the owner of the firm. And so when I left the firm, I decided to do this work, and I saw areas of opportunity to bolster this so that owners could have greater success, not just fly in, do your retreat, leave, come back in 90 days. Like, there was some sense of communication in between. There was data tracking. I'm more integrated in the firms now than I used to be able to do when I was working at the consulting firm. So this has been quite a labor of love, and this journey with Velocity Work has really been about empowering owners so that they can be very clear about what they're doing here at the firm, what they're setting their sights on. They get really organized with their plan, and then there's some things in planning that we focus on, and then their job is to honor their plan. I would say, by the way, you guys are impeccable with honoring your plan, which is not true across the board. So it's really refreshing to see you're impeccable with a few things. And I'm not just blowing smoke because I'm on your podcast. So
good.
Yeah. But that's a bit of an intro. Yeah.
So I know your company exclusively focuses on lawyers and law firms, right?
Yep.
What are the characteristics you're seeing in lawyers and law firms that you think are common to businesses or entrepreneurs across the board? And what are unique to lawyers and law firms that might present unique challenges to scaling and building a law firm that you might not find in other types of businesses?
I think the ones that are the commonalities among other owners and entrepreneurs is that you don't get away from culture and people. And that is such a big part of being able to grow in the way that you want to grow. Shaping your culture starts at the top. That is true no matter what business you're running. And it's one of the most challenging pieces for not just lawyers and law firm owners, but across the board. We could go more into that. But I think if there's some specificity among law firm owners, it is more around the producers of the work and expectations, standards, which some of that is culture, but some of that is just accountability and knowing what you need from your team and being able to clearly state that from your producers. You know, you guys have a pretty elite team of attorneys and paralegals, and there are expectations that you do a really great job with conveying and holding the line. And that's really important. And that's not the case across all firms. And when that's the crux of everything is the work that you're putting out into the world and the work that you're doing for your clients, when that's not dialed, everybody feels it. And there's just this edge that's missing. And so I would say that's where my head went first when you asked that question was the team of producers and, you know, depending on the model of the firm, that you have to be really in tune with it and you have to make sure that you're being as clear as possible and your standards are high.
Is that something that's fixable?
It is maybe or maybe not with the same team, but of course it's fixable.
Ben, let me ask you this. When I joined the firm, one of the first things you did was you had me read a strategic plan that you had obviously drafted internally, a very well done strategic plan. And I think some people listening to this might think they can do everything in-house and won't need the help of a independent third party. What made you decide to bring on a third party, obviously Melissa in this case, and why do you feel that is important and a necessity to making sure the plan goes correctly?
It's a great question, Jeff, and I think it will segue into another question for Melissa playing off of that. But I actually believed that it was a great luxury when we had reached the point in our growth that we could consider hiring someone like Melissa. I feel like I always wanted to do that, but before you have enough, I mean, number one, cash flow, number two, systems and structures and personnel in place, it's not clear to me what value you can have by bringing in someone like Melissa to help you build to the next level. So early on, I thought it would be great to work with someone like that. And when we get to the point when we're mature enough and need that help, I'm really excited, looking forward to doing it. And so there's a sense in which I felt like we had earned the right to do it based on what we had put in place before. And that was right around the time we hired you, Jeff, and we're moving towards a managed firm model. But I guess that segues to my question for Melissa, which is, what is the right time for a firm to bring in someone like you? And was I wrong in waiting until that moment, or, is there value you add earlier in the process? Now I view it as a necessity because I've seen how valuable it is. But before that, when you're prioritizing how you're going to spend your limited resources, it seemed like a luxury and not one we could afford early in the process.
I mean, I would challenge that you weren't able to afford it. Listen, I place a lot of value on what I do, but I'm not that expensive. Truly, I would push back on that. Ben, I think this speaks to your character. I remember you telling me, this is rare. I've only had 2 clients that have been in this, dare I say, caliber in terms of their mental state and their personal accountability, where you said, I don't need a call between our planning sessions. You tell me to do something, I'm going to get it done. It's like that with everything in my life. And so I could see where that lends itself to early on getting further than maybe someone who doesn't have that level of personal accountability can get. And it's not that someone can't grow on their own before, but most often I work with people earlier than when I'm working with you. Not most often. Just, yeah, most of the people I have consult calls with, they're younger on their journey and they haven't flushed everything out the same way that you had flushed everything out. So there's a lot of value in having someone help you flesh things out, which you did have help from an incredible company, by the way. I don't know to what extent, but the vision that is documented that there was a company sort of facilitating some of that prior to when I worked with you, it's incredible. So I don't know who to give credit there. Maybe that's mostly you. Chances are it is. But you had so much done before I met you that it lets us hit the ground running in a different way. But I don't think for someone like you, maybe earlier wouldn't have been the best thing because you still had the reins in a way that you were driving forward in a way that most people don't drive forward to completion. And I think you took this puppy as far as you could and then got it to a level that you decided, okay, we've done all the hard work. Now we're going to pull in some, not just external third party companies, but also you started carrying out your vision. That's exactly what you started to do. And that involved a third party, but it also involved Jeff. It also involved some moves that you made, otherwise. So I don't know. I genuinely think you're a bit of a rare bird, but if you want to ask some specifics, I can share more about that. But earlier is not too soon. It really depends on when you want to. There is some accountability when it's working with velocity work. And so when do you want that external accountability? And when can your own internal accountability take it to where you want to go? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So folks listening to this who are engaged in building their own firms and at different stages, when would you advise, at what juncture, or when they're confronting what issues would you advise that they first reach out to you to seek help?
When you have a team of 5 or more, we really can work with that. And it depends on the type of firm. Are most of the firms that listen to you, are they contingency fee
Well,
or not
our
necessarily?
other podcast is focused primarily on plaintiff trial lawyers. This one has a broader
Okay.
listenership, so I think probably more of them are than not, but probably not all. And I know you work
Yeah.
with all types of firms, right? Not just
Yeah.
contingent fee, but hourly rate and criminal
Flat
defense
fee.
firms and family law firms and
Correct.
everything, right?
Correct. Yeah. Contingency fee is, it's a different beast. So I would say generally the firm is closer to the size of 10 or more by the time I work with a contingency fee practice. The revenues, it depends on the average case values, but normally there's not a firm that's below, which is going to sound maybe small to you guys, but below a million in annual revenue a year. And then as high as with our clients, 12 million in annual revenue a year. And that's only growing, which is great. So I think it depends on the practice areas, but for contingency, the team size is usually somewhere around 10, and their sights are set very high with revenue goals, and they're early in the stages for that.
Yeah. And are there major differences you're seeing in how you're structuring and planning for contingent versus non-contingent fee firms?
hmm Yeah. So one thing is when you have consistent monthly revenue coming in, whether it's through hourly or flat fee or whatever, that makes more sense to have goals and milestones that are revenue based for the firm. And when it's contingency fee, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have, over the course of the year, we want to do this. And that's what it means in Q1. And that's what it means in Q2. And this is what it means in Q3. It doesn't make a lot of sense in that way. We know with contingency fee, we have an annual goal. Sometimes it's even further out a goal, maybe 2 years, 3 years. And there are certain indicators that we look at, we know we need to look at in order to be sure that we are on track for the longer term goal. In your case, qualified cases. That's something that we look at. Trial dates set. That's another one that we look at. Like what are the indicators that mean, okay, if we do these things, that means we're going to be on track for the longer term goal. And that's different than a firm that has the quick revenue cycles. So I would say that's the biggest difference when goal setting. It's way longer planning, and you have to identify the levers that are indicators to you that you are on the right path.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I mean, you came to that quite quickly. It took me about 20 years to figure this out, that in contingent fee, it's I mean, unless you do a high volume practice where it tends to
Yeah.
average out and you can predict within small bandwidths based on the statistical averages When
Uh-huh.
you do a larger case practice like ours, where so much turns on a few of the biggest cases, it's harder to measure things based on revenue. And we developed this metric that you alluded to of qualified cases, which is that if we have cases that meet certain criteria, we know that those cases will monetize within a certain time frame and a certain range. And exactly where they fall in that range, we don't know, but we know that the measure of success of our practice is how many of those qualified cases we have, because almost all of them do monetize eventually. And that's really driven a lot of our decision making around what we're doing for staffing, marketing, all kinds of things. Once you have that insight, it changes a lot in terms of internal planning.
It really is about taking control where you can take control. And sometimes it can feel like in your line of practice, it can feel like you don't have there's so much uncertainty and people just stay in that story. But within any business, there's places that you could take control. And so it's identifying the levers. What are those? Because in many cases, they're not obvious. They're underneath some things. And then you identify the lever that you have and that you can take control over. And when you do that, then you affect your outcomes. And until then, you just keep sort of buying into the story that all I could do is just keep trying really hard and, hopefully these pay out. We don't know. Like, I really don't like engaging in that kind of conversation.
What I realized in thinking about that is that really in the plaintiff's world, it becomes a cop out and a way to avoid accountability, because you just say,
Yes.
well, there's no way to really plan for this kind of business. We're just
Yes.
special and unique, and our case might be worth 10 million or might be worth 1 million. And so therefore, let's just skip the whole planning process altogether and kind of roll the dice and hope it all works out. That's a cop out,
Right.
because there are ways to plan. We've figured out a way that makes sense. It's just a different metric than, gross revenue per quarter or something. I want to shift gears and put Jeff on the spot, since he did that to me. So you had arrived at our office, and within 3 days of starting your job, we flew you out to Colorado, and we did a retreat with Melissa and her team out there. What was that experience like for you? And then I want to have Melissa kind of talk about why she does that process and what the goal of that is.
Yeah, I mean, at first it was intimidating because, to your point, I was here 3 days, was learning everyone's names and trying to remember my passwords to log in. And then I'm on a plane with the partners flying to Colorado to do strategic planning for a firm that I have virtually zero familiarity with and no experience in the legal field. So it was intimidating, but it was probably the best thing that happened because it expedited my knowledge and my initiation to the firm tenfold, if not more. And I was able to listen to all the nuances and learn the plan from the ground up. And I tried to interject my opinions on things based upon my past operational experience and my life experiences. And I felt that even though I didn't have a background, that I did add value to those meetings. And it was invaluable for being able to spend time with you and Taylor and Catherine right out of the gate for really 3 full days. So I loved it.
It's good. I thought you were such a rock star. And the conversations that got to happen there, it was you could tell how thirsty you guys were for those conversations. And for you, Jeff, it felt like, oh my gosh, this is great. I mean, they were digging into things that they've been dealing with for a long time, different opinions in the room. And for you to be able to soak that up felt like I was happy for you. Because just to your point, like there's no better way to start. This is it. You're in the deep end of the pool, and it lets you hit the ground running in a different way when you go back.
Yeah. No, I loved it. And, for people listening, to me, the biggest benefit that a Melissa brings is the facilitation of those meetings. Because if there's not an outside independent third party doing the facilitation and doing it correctly, a lot of times those meetings, I don't want to say become contentious or more contentious that they should, but there needs to be somebody there to direct it. And you did that masterfully. It really assisted with us finding a correct path to where we wanted to go. So that third party facilitation is probably the biggest thing for me that you and your team brings.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. There's nothing better than rolling up your sleeves and getting in the ring with the clients. I think, before you guys showed up, there was a lot of prep before that day, lots and lots of data gathering and discovery and all of that so that we could do a good job facilitating. And, that day is sort of the end of a lot of hard work that went into understanding the business, not just for me. I always joke, I do all that prep work for me because I don't want to step into a room. I don't want anybody that works for me to step into a room unless they really understand what's in front of them. But it's great to inform the team like, hey, this is the current state. This is what's going on. These are the patterns. These are the things that we're going to have to look at to bridge the gap from here to there. And so anyway, I think most of great facilitation happens before you get into the room. And then getting into the room, you just have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and stay connected to the clients. Don't let them go down rabbit holes that they shouldn't be going down, which is hard sometimes.
Yeah,
but
very hard.
Yeah, but anyway.
No, and I like that you also challenged and asked why a lot. And a good facilitator does that. It was a great experience, and I'm looking forward to our next one in 4 months roughly.
You're mostly just looking forward to the next bison steak.
I did leave that out of the story when we were in
I wondered if
Denver.
you guys were going to bring it up.
So Melissa,
Fantastic
for those
bison.
It is. It's generated a whole new insight into steaks for us. But that's a whole separate podcast episode. Melissa, for folks who haven't been through that, can you maybe just explain if somebody does hire you and they end up coming and doing one of these retreat sessions, what would they expect to gain from that? What's the process look like for them? And is that a kind of a one and done? For us, it wasn't, but what is the process then going forward from there, typically for you with your clients?
Yeah. When someone, the very first engagement, and this is true for anyone that comes into Velocity Works Sphere, there is a short term engagement. We call it foundation, but it's really, you come in, we do deep discovery with, we interview some of the key team members, certainly the owners. And then once we really understand the business and we make sure we understand the business, then we build a data portal that lets us have, there's some data that's pumped in. And then from there, we can do analysis to figure out the current state of the firm. Through discovery, I'm learning where the owners really want to go. So the picture just gets clearer and clearer along this short engagement. It's usually about 3 months long. So when you come in, we do the discovery, we get your data, we do analysis, and then we share the analysis. And that is, I know where you want to go, and I know exactly where you're sitting. And so then that lets us have a higher level conversation when we get into the room. So that retreat, you had a 2-day retreat, that marks the end of that engagement. And that can be it. And there's a lot of value just in that standalone engagement. If people want to continue on, which that means we host their quarterly planning sessions where you're reflecting and reviewing on the quarter you just had, you're looking ahead, making sure that you're still aligned with where you say you want to go, get organized, identify a couple of strategic priorities. All of that we host and lead a year at a time. We work with clients, and that's on a quarterly basis. And once a year, you always have a bigger one that's 2 days. And for you guys, that's right at the turn of the year. And that's what Jeff was referencing coming up, the in-person in Denver. We'll do it again.
Melissa, do you and your company subscribe to any particular strategic strategy, Six Sigma, EOS, or anything, or is there a combination or something more proprietary?
Yeah, it's a blend. I didn't realize the firm I worked for, our CEO was really specific about the facilitation. And what I learned when I left is that it was sort of an amalgamation of many different frameworks out there that he believed putting these things together in this way really produced the best result. So when I left, I had some of that under my belt, and then as time has gone on, you find new. I was just telling Jeff before we started, like there's a book I'm reading, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's so freaking good. And so I like for sure there's going to be a concept that I pull out of that I'll find a way to incorporate. So I think over time, if you know where the client needs to end up, which is with a lot of clarity about where they're going and what they're supposed to be doing so that they're on track with it, it's important to keep developing the process to help people get there better and better ways. So, but for sure, EOS has had great things that I've pulled in. I always give credit when I pull them in. Strategic Coach has had a few things here and there that have been really great, really helpful. Gazelle's Scaling Up, that's a framework that I admire deeply. Those are probably the three biggest. And over the last year, I've gotten some new pieces that now I'm incorporating in just to hopefully be more effective, in the room with clients.
Need help on a complex personal injury or medical malpractice case? Gideon Asen accepts case referrals and regularly co-counsels with lawyers nationwide on high-value claims. The firm has recovered millions of dollars in cases that competitors turned away because they dig deeper. Ready to learn more? Email bgideon@gideonasenlaw.com to start the conversation. Gideon Asen shares fees as permitted by the laws of each state. Don't let complex cases overwhelm your practice. Elevate justice together with Gideon Asen.
Melissa, let me ask you this. So I know some of our listeners right now are working at larger firms and debating on whether they should jump ship, hang their own shingle, and make the dive into doing it. Can you talk about what made you leave your consulting firm and start your own? Because really the parallels are exactly what some of our listeners are thinking about doing.
I mean, the one thing that probably is different, I was traveling, I was on the road full time. I was just going from office to office to office to office facilitating these. So by the time I left that company, I had done over 350 strategic planning retreats for the company's clients. I was tired. I'd been on the road full time for about 5 years, and the headquarters was in Atlanta. And I really I didn't want to move. And back then they weren't going to have any remote workers. I liked the company. I loved my work. I just needed to come off the road. In addition to that, me being boots on the ground with clients, I could see holes and opportunities. That's probably a nicer way to say that. I could see opportunities to improve the product, so to speak. And when I would bring that back to headquarters, it was well received, but so slow. To get something shifted to where it was okay for the crew of us that were sent out to these offices, for everybody to implement something specific to accommodate the hole I was seeing, it just wasn't happening fast enough. So there was no accountability, which is crazy to think about, between my company that I was working for and the clients. The CEO was really specific. Go in, get out, show up again in 90 days. And there's nothing in between. They don't get their stuff done, that's on them. And I was like, gosh, these are busy humans that could really use someone to be in their ear to say, or maybe to help them think through barriers, but also just, yo, how's it going? Are these rocks in place? Are these strategic priorities? Are you making headway? Where are you stuck? Where is there not accountability? Just a conversation. It was almost like the conversation would die between retreats. And I saw opportunity to maybe improve upon what I had been taught and what I had been doing for so long. And, when you see a way to do something in your mind's eye better, then, and you're the right kind of person, you aren't really willing to just sit by. And so, there's a fire under I don't know if I can cuss on here. So there was a fire under my booty. And then I left and started my own thing, and it was the best decision I ever made. And let's give credit where credit is due. I never would have been prepared for something like that had I not worked for the firm I worked for. I have a lot of gratitude for that firm. And when I left, I was ready.
I have to say, you have a beautiful space in Denver with panoramic views of the mountains and the city. So it's an idyllic spot to spend a few days doing your retreat. I also am led to believe that your neighbor in the building is Russell Westbrook. the basketball player, although
He
he might have been
was, isn't he?
traded recently, I think,
I think he was.
from
Yeah, I
Denver.
don't know if he's.
When we were out there,
Yeah,
we managed to get to a Mavs game, and I mean, not a Mavs game, what's the Denver team again?
Nuggets.
Nuggets game,
Yeah.
and we saw Jokic shoot, throw a ball from the foul line on one end of the court all the way into the basket. It was a 3/4 court shot at the buzzer, which
Oh my
was
gosh.
completely insane. I don't, that rarely ever happens, and the crowd went
Uh,
crazy. So not only did we
oh,
get our fill of bison meat, but we also had the epic basketball game out there. But so I wanted to
We
ask
got
you,
some work done out there too.
yeah, we got some,
yeah.
maybe. I wanted to ask you about, so you've now worked, I'm sure, with hundreds and hundreds of law firms. So you've seen a ton of stuff. What are some of the most common mistakes you're seeing lawyers make in trying to grow their businesses? And maybe you can give a couple freebies here on pointers
Yeah.
that lawyers can use to try to fix some of those mistakes.
I think they dig into their data too late. We have a saying over here, facts, not feelings. And I don't believe that you can grow intentionally unless you really have your hands around the data in the firm.
And data meaning what?
People don't have a good sense of, even if we just talk about the financials of the firm, not even in the operations or the cases of the firm. The financials, I will ask an owner, this is common. I will ask an owner on a consult, where are you sitting in terms of profit margin, or at least where were you last year? And they'll say, I don't know, I'm going to have to check. What? Like, so I think people, it's not that there's always something to do with the number, but someone should be a good steward over the numbers in the firm. So yes, top line revenue, advanced case costs, client costs, like for cash flow purposes. People just in their minds, they just think it's a lot. We need a lot of extra because we have a lot of, case costs. They don't know their team costs, or like what percentage of income actually is spent on the people in the firm. And it's okay that people don't know this. I don't judge people when I first hear it, but they should want to know it. Someone needs to be a good steward over the numbers of a business. The business is I have a picture. I don't know if anybody, I'm strong. I was a strong science background. I have a picture of a cell in my head. It's like a living, breathing entity, your business is. And if someone isn't caring over that, if someone isn't having full responsibility over being a steward of that living, breathing entity, then it's not going to be able to thrive in the ways that it could be. And lawyers generally don't love numbers. They don't love math. There are certainly exceptions to that. And I work with plenty of people who like math, but I meet a lot of people who that's not what they think to dig into. It's not their forte. So I would say really understanding the numbers behind the business. So we talked about some of the financial pieces, but also how many leads are you getting? How many of those are, in your case, this is a slower process, but depending on the firm, it could be a much faster process. How many of those leads are qualified? What is the average value per case type? What is the average value per case in your firm? In any given business, when I'm doing discovery, this is me figuring out what are the numbers we need to know? What are the numbers we need to pull in? And someone having that curiosity, or at least wanting to be curious about that, is important. And it's often overlooked because when there's a lot of money flying around, you can be a little lazy about it until you hit a pain point, and then it just sucks. And then you dig into the numbers, right? So staying ahead of that is something that a lot of law firms aren't doing in the way that they could do. And if they do, data provides a point that you can make decisions around and use in your decisions instead of the data being at the effect of your decisions. That's number one. You were saying the question was, what do people not do well? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Others is being clear about expectations when hires are made. And most of the time that's not done because the leadership or the owners aren't as clear as they should be. So they can't really be clear with expectations for those they bring on. That's a journey, and that changes over time, especially if you have someone pointing it out. But that's missing a lot when I get to meet a firm.
It triggered a thought. We did an earlier episode where I offered the thought, and I'm curious as to whether you agree or don't with it, but it's something that I feel like I came to after thinking through this, that although you think about a law firm as kind of one type of thing, there are, of course, very different types of law firms, and owners, as you point out, have very different goals. And Some people open firms really just to have a platform to sell their own personal legal services, or maybe the services of themselves and one partner or a couple people. And then there's a different model of a firm that's looking to grow. And that's more of kind of an entrepreneurial exercise where you're thinking about systems and structures and all of the metrics that go into growth and making sure your growth exceeds your cash flow, can handle the growth, and that there's good ROI on the things you're doing. But it's a much more involved process because I feel like a lot of lawyers can be successful just basically selling their own legal services. It's a tried and true business model, and it doesn't require all that much planning to do that part effectively. But I guess I'm curious for you, do you see firms, the question is when firms look to grow, does that generate new considerations and issues in terms of their planning and risk as compared to a firm that's just looking to remain successful and stable but not grow?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It informs kind of what you have to line yourself up with, right? But it is interesting. I would not imagine that there's many listeners of your podcast that, they sell their personal services and it's small. And the reason is because that's not freedom. If you want freedom, you have to grow and you have to not be at the center of your entire client world, right? So I would imagine most people listening to this, that's not their desire, is to stay in that zone of being in the center of all of it. I don't know if you have read Good to Great, but he talks about level 4 helpers or level 4 leaders and level 5 leaders and level 4 leaders, which even if you don't want this, people don't know how to get out of it, or you're at the center. I think it's called leader with 1,000 helpers. And that versus where you are taking yourself out of the center of everything and doing that over time and doing that strategically, like there's some really big moves that need to be made, important moves that need to be made in order to make that true. And to your point, when you were talking about earlier, structure and systems and all of those things that you need to put into place so that the owner can be taken out of the center and the quality is still top notch. Clients are receiving the best quality service that they can get, and that this living, breathing entity gets to thrive even without you in the center. Now, all these mistakes are coming to my mind that happen. And so if I could share, because I really believe this, so it would be crazy for me not to say it. We were thinking about mistakes that people make, and this is at every size of firm. Whether you use someone like Velocity Work or you do this on your own, to take every quarter space to reflect on what you just went through and to plan for the upcoming, let's say 90 days, I think that's a really good cadence, is so fruitful and reduces friction and ensures that you are moving as quickly as possible because you are taking space to think it through. And most people just fly fast towards where they think it is they want to go. But taking the space to really reflect, and this is where I think accountability comes in, even if it's personal accountability. It doesn't have to be third-party accountability, though I think that's a fantastic choice to make. That level of getting honest, looking at what's working, what's not working, who is working, who's not working, making decisions about what 1 degree shifts do we need to make to ensure that we're on the right track. And people just run hard for years at a time. So I do think that's a mistake. Is it's easy to set it aside and just keep thinking, yeah, I'm going to do that at some point when I have a chance to get away, but just give yourself some space to think. If you are the leader of a firm, that is your job. Someone has to do it. And if you're not giving yourself the space to do it in a meaningful way, then you will likely be off by a degree or more from what you really want. But it's hard to feel that and hard to understand or see that unless you take space. So I wanted to say that. I believe that with all my heart. And that's true for any business owner, by the way, but we're talking about law firms.
Do you find the people decisions are the hardest ones that firms struggle to make? Taking a serious look at their current staff, making the correct hires, putting the right people in the right places to succeed. Do you find that to be a consistent struggle for everyone?
It depends on the level of honesty that the firm is willing to have. There are times where we have our favorites of people in the organization, but they may not be lining up exactly the way that the firm needs. And I think the more honest and objective you can be about your team, the easier those decisions become. Or they're just not, they're less dramatic. That's a better way to say it. There's less drama around decisions that need to happen around people. I do think that people is the one of the greatest challenges of any growing business. But, just like we were talking earlier about, you have to get underneath that. Like, what's the lever that's going to affect revenue? What's the lever that makes all of that run more seamlessly? And where can you take control in a way that will give you what you're looking for in terms of team and culture? I know you have some interviews coming up with some key people that you're hiring, and you've done hiring this year. Jeff, you were saying like you've hired 7 people this year, I think.
Well, the last 8 months, we've gone from 12 to 17 staff, and we're looking to bring on 2 more. So,
5.
yeah.
Okay, so it will be 7. So when I think about how you position yourselves in order to attract real talent, like people who should be inside of your organization, like that positioning is a lever that you can control. And a lot of people don't take the reins the way I think you guys do in a really healthy way. So, that's one thing that popped in my mind about that I'm witnessing with you all is you guys, I'm not saying it's easy, but you guys attract really great talent, and there's a reason for that. And then you'll have stories from other firms that just say there's no one great out there. Like there's no one. Okay, it starts and stops with you. Where are you not taking control? Why do you think you're not finding people when other firms are finding people? I mean, these are these little things that you can control that change the game when it comes to the things that are required to grow, which people is a big one of those.
Yeah, and a lot of that came out of our experience in learning how to do that when we hired Jeff, which was a very deliberative and thoughtful process guided by an outside company that helped us understand how to recruit and hire really good people. And second, at our retreat, you may recall, we started by revisiting our core values and really developing ones that were not just generic terms that everyone likes, such as we're hardworking, we're ethical. It described much more specificity, the kind of people that thrive in our environment and that who we want here that fit into our culture. And then every job listing we've posted since then has centered around searching for people that share those core values. So, for example, one of them is making sacrifices for opportunities. And we think of opportunities for our clients to get the best results in their case, but also opportunities for themselves and so forth. Some people are looking to punch a clock and 9 to 5, and that's how they look at their job as a paycheck. People in our firm don't look at it that way. They're here, they want to sacrifice, they believe in the mission, they believe in the competition of the case and getting the best result for our client. And there's nothing wrong with having the different viewpoint about it, but they just aren't people that mesh with our culture. And we did that across the board with multiple values that we all developed, with your help in that first retreat. So,
I mean, you guys are doing a good job of almost like a moth to a flame. I know that you've attracted some really good talent before you did the work on the core values and before all of that, but you're just tightening that up and you're getting brighter. You're like, there's a honing that is happening that is really calling in the right people faster. It's really cool to see.
I was just going to say, one of the keys is we're willing to wait for the right people.
Yes. Yes.
We don't want to just fill a seat, and they could have the best resume in the world and all the experience in the world, but if they're not a culture fit, we don't want them. We want the whole package, and they have to be a culture fit in order for it to work for everybody. And we're willing to hold out for that. We've made some very good decisions, and we've been lucky enough to have some excellent candidates, and our next 2 hires are going to fit right in, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So as we kind of wind down, I want to say one of the things I enjoyed most about working with you, Melissa, is that in addition to helping steer us and keep us accountable for the work that we take on, you're also just a great listener and fun to spend time with. And I think that's a very important aspect of finding someone to facilitate, someone that you actually can spend multiple days with without them like annoying you or getting on your nerves or being overly prescriptive and trying to condescendingly dictate to you what they think you should be doing. You don't have that approach. I've worked with other people that do have that approach. It's sort of, I know best and here's what you need to do. That's not how you approach it. And you treat us like adults and help us work through our issues and guide us to get to a good result, but you're not thumbing the scale too much. You know when to put your finger on the scale when it's necessary to shift the conversation in a positive way. But you're very skilled at doing that. And I would highly recommend you if a firm is serious about it, because I don't think it's worth your time or investment if you're not. And I don't think you want to work with firms where they're not serious. But if you're serious about growing, building, and improving yourself, I'd highly recommend you reach out to Melissa and Velocity Work. And I know you also have a podcast yourself. So in fact, I think that's how I found you initially, was listening to a podcast episode where you were on. How can people learn more about you, your business, and get in touch with you?
Yeah, the podcast is the Law Firm Owner Podcast, and you can get that anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And our website is velocitywork.com, and it should do a great job of helping you learn a little more. And if you want to schedule a conversation for a consult, then you can. Those are the two best places to learn more. But I would say start with the podcast. I mean, most of the consults I have are people who start out by saying, I've been listening for a long time. I wanted to reach out. It's a great resource. I work really hard on it to produce content that feels useful. And I think it's a great place to start and sort of kick yourself into a new gear.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I love your podcast, by the way. I listen to it.
It's so good seeing you, Melissa.
Yeah.
You too.
Thanks for listening to Elevate, Build and Grow Your Law Firm. Share with colleagues if you found it valuable. Remember, building a successful law firm takes discipline, strategy, and determination. But you're not alone. Produced and powered by Law Pods.